Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, you're lucky, we've got two special guests on the show. We're joined by Michael Solomon and Rishon Blumberg, who are thought leaders on the future of work and the talent economy, and they're also the co-authors of the best-selling book, Game Changer, How to Be 10X in the Talent Economy. Welcome to the show. How are you both?
Great to be here. Yeah.
That's the moment when you have two guests and no one knows who goes first on the other side.
On a Friday afternoon, so I can't complain about that.
Amazing. Before we go any further, I know I gave a brief intro, but for each of you, just give our listeners a little bit more. Give us the origin story, the background, and your journey to where we are today. We'll start with yourself, Michael.
So I'll probably include a little bit of our backstory in there together, but we've known each other since we were 8 years old. That's a long time ago, as you can see from our images.
It's only 20 years. That's only 20 years because we're just 28 years old.
No, if you say that, then we look terrible for our ages. So I've got rather go with it was like 60 years ago, and then somebody's going to be like, "Wow, those guys look great for their age."
It's true. It's true. We do look great.
So in our early 20s, we started our first entrepreneurial endeavor, which was an artist management company in the music industry. We had a really nice run. That company is still alive and well, and we are still operating it. Along the way, the music industry was pretty badly disrupted, and we decided that we needed to contemplate another avenue of revenue, and we sort of looked at each other and said, well, what skills do music managers have to be able to translate into other industries? And we thought, well, we know how to manage talent, and there's this whole new class of talent that's emerged. So let's see if they want management. And lo and behold, we did a little experiment with one person. That person turned out to be great and actually turned out to be our former co-founder. And he joined us in starting this company. And we built 10X Management over the last roughly decade now. And the big pivot was bringing the idea of talent management or an agency to technology, which no one had done as of when we did that. Along the way, we've started a bunch of nonprofit organizations as well. And we are definitely serial entrepreneurs because we are now three companies, three for-profit and three nonprofits deep in, and I don't think we're done yet either.
And I'll add a little color sort of on the more personal side. Both Michael and I grew up in New York City. We're New York City natives in the 70s and 80s. And it was a very hustle-rich time in New York. And I think that really instilled in us this idea of entrepreneurship from a very early age. And as Michael said, we started out in entertainment. We still represent rock musicians, pop musicians, Vanessa Carlton, for example. We managed John Mayer for a number of years. And then, at some point along the way, we realized that what we do, as Michael said, sort of really translates into taking care of talent and also helping to plug the right talent into the right opportunities. And that's really where 10X comes in, where we represent people who we consider to be exponentially better at doing things than others. And we help companies quickly match with those people that we represent. So that's sort of the role that we view ourselves in. It's very much helping to solve the talent issue, but not on a platform level. It's not AI. It's really, this is a human-based endeavor.
Amazing. Such a cool story as well. And as I mentioned before the show, my co-founder is my next door neighbor. And we've known each other since we were kids. And kind of feels like we have a similar journey. Obviously, we're a bit behind you along the way. So hopefully we're 20 years from now, we're successful and like you both. But it's pretty cool that you've both been on this journey together.
Yeah, it's relationships are hard. They take work and time and love and patience and humility.
Would you recommend to other entrepreneurs to work with your friend though? Because it's not easy, right?
There are pros and cons. The pro obviously is that somebody implicitly, and theoretically that should inoculate you from some of the unknowns that you get when you're partnering with somebody who you don't know very well. But obviously, if things go sideways, that friendship could be in jeopardy and all the other things that surround the friendship, which of your friends gets you versus them if it doesn't work out. But more importantly than partnering with a best friend, I do think having a partnership is an important tool in successfully growing something. You've got two minds doing things rather than one. And, there's a yin and yang to it. Things that Michael does well, maybe I don't do as well, and vice versa. But also, I think more importantly, it allows you to establish and learn how to communicate more effectively, because you have to be able to convey what's going on to the other person and vice versa. So I think, to me, that was the biggest takeaway from our partnership, is I think we're both exceptionally better at communicating because of it.
So obviously 10Xer, as you call it, how do you define a 10Xer?
Go ahead, Rish.
Michael, why don't you take that? You want me to take that? I define a 10Xer as somebody who is equal parts IQ and EQ. So, the IQ part everybody knows about. EQ is really the emotional quotient. It's how people relate to one another, how you communicate, how you problem solve. It's a lot of the soft skills, some of which we just were talking about, that really allow you to excel and overcome obstacles that lesser people that don't have the same level of EQ really can't overcome. So you can take somebody who is truly brilliant, just off the charts brilliant, but if they can't communicate, if they can't play well with others, I can pretty much guarantee that projects they work on will not end up going the way that they want them to go or they expect them to go. Because having a huge brain is not enough. You need to be able to explain the things that are going on in that huge brain to the other people that you're working with, because inevitably we all have somebody that we report to or that we work with or we collaborate with. No person is an island in this world. So that's, to us, what a 10Xer really is. It's someone who's exceptional at both EQ and IQ.
And often it's a term that's used to describe people who produce 10 times the value of their peers. And it sounds, Chris, from what I know about you, that you were one of those in an earlier, or maybe you are currently, but in an earlier moment in your career with something that was very measurable. You actually were doing 10 times the same as your peers in terms of the output. And that is, people often ask us, do they really exist? And they actually do. And we've seen it and have great stories about, a team of 3 of our people replacing a team of 33 people. It's rare that you have such a definitive use case where the numbers actually line up and you can really measure it like that. But these people are that much better.
Yeah. What is the most effective way to manage 10Xers?
So the first thing to realize is people who are high achievers is that they have choices. They don't need to be, it's not like they can only perform at that level in your environment, in your company, in your department. So if you're treating them in a way that's any less than what they are, they're not going to stick around endlessly because they have other choices. And it's not like their other choices are particularly inferior to you. So the first thing is understanding that you're going to want to treat these people well because they're important to you. The second thing is they don't like cookie cutter. We're not in a world where cookie cutter works anymore. We're in a bespoke world. You get, you watch a movie on Netflix or on Hulu and it recommends the next movie for you. There's personalized medicine, there's personalized playlists. Everything is customized at this point in this world to the individual user, except for HR. HR is somewhat customized, but to a degree, it's a process, and it's not. If you actually play out any hiring moment, usually, and I can't speak to every market around the world, but usually the only thing that gets asked before an offer is made is, what are your requirements? What are your comp requirements? They don't say, do you care about working from home? I mean, that's a new topic or a relatively new topic. They don't say, how important is vacation time to you? They don't ask about what professional development needs that you have. They ask one question, and that's the mistake. And we actually built a tool called the lifestyle calculator that we use with people when we help them negotiate full-time job offers, because it starts out by saying, what do you care about? Like, you get 100 points on 24 different attributes that go into a job package. And by the way, other than people who put 100 points on salary, I've never seen 2 people who have the same exact spread.
Yeah, definitely.
So why not start with stuff like that and think about being customized for these people? The other thing that they want is feedback, because that's how they get better. They really want constructive, regular feedback. The ones who are truly 10Xers are looking for that all over the place. And the last thing they want is to be around other people who are great. Like there's a line that I heard many years ago, I think from my father, that says, It's really hard to soar with eagles when you work with turkeys.
That's a good one.
You don't want to put those people at, where they're so far out in front of everybody else.
100%. What are the biggest mistakes that you see companies make on the flip side of that when managing 10Xs?
Well, I think micromanagement is a big problem, especially, we use technology as the backdrop for our book, although there's a bunch of other sort of non-technology verticals represented in stories and interviews. But, if you can imagine writing code, the last thing you want to do in the middle of writing code is being tapped on the shoulder to come into a meeting, or, being forced to review emails and things like that. So I think that the interruption and disruption and micromanagement of this kind of talent is a mistake. Everybody needs and wants some form of management. And as Michael mentioned, in the bespoke world, you as a manager really have to understand who is on your team and what levers work best with them managerially. This is the other thing, you don't want to treat people like a cog. No 10Xer wants to feel like, oh, they're just one of 1,000 or 10,000 people that work at the company, because they know their value. They know what they're doing, what they're delivering. So they want the respect of being treated, not differently, but being treated as who they are as an individual. So I think that's very often a mistake is micromanagement, not understanding who you're managing and what makes them tick. And then the other thing I think that happens very often, and this goes back to what Michael was saying about the hiring process, is culture to me is probably one of the most important things that you can try and understand and establish at the outset with a prospective candidate. If the cultures match, so many 10Xers are purpose driven. They want to do work that really aligns with their values and doing good in the world. If a company can establish that what their culture is matches with what your culture is, management becomes much easier because you're all really rowing in the same direction. So those are really those are the common mistakes that we see. It's micromanagement, it's too many meetings and interruptions, it's not treating the person as an individual, and it's entering somebody into a culture clash.
Yeah, it's a big challenge.
That's really what we hear so often from our clients is, I just wish they would let me do what I'm there to do and get out of the way and allow me to be the 10Xer that I can be for them. I know that there was a quote from, who was it? I can't remember right now. I'll come back to it, but there's a really good quote about, we don't hire people to tell them what to do. We don't hire brilliant minds to tell them what to do. Mm-hmm. We hire brilliant minds so they can tell us what to do.
Yeah.
Right. And that's sort of our vision for 10Xers is, you're bringing somebody in that's great, that's an expert, that knows what they're talking about. Give them the support they need, but get out of their way and let them do their job.
Yeah. It's interesting
Chris,
go for it, Mark.
You brought up something, that when you asked about sort of managing people and we talked about it being bespoke, one of the things that's really related to that is the why. You brought up the TED Talk that sort of sparked that revolution, but part of what it means to be a bespoke boss and to understand who you're managing is understanding what their personal why is.
Yes.
Why do they work at your company? Where do they want to go in their life? And how are you part of that plan versus just thinking about how they serve your needs? It's really flipping the whole thing on its head and understanding that it used to be you got hired at a company, you worked there all the years, and the pure exchange was you did work, they gave you money. The truth is people, especially the younger generations, and especially coming out of COVID, people want meaning in their life. They want meaning in their work. And if they are a 10Xer, they can get it. So if you're not plugging into what matters to them, which is what you were just talking about, why you left the company, then you're going to lose people. And it's really easy to learn what they care about. I mean, I can just say I do one-on-ones with the people on our team internally, and I know what they care about. I know what they want to work on. I know where they want to improve on. I know where they want to go. And for some of them, we don't have places for them to go, and we're going to help them grow as much as they can grow and then help them go somewhere else and do it. And that works really well for us. Mm-hmm. Our retention is so much better than it would be if we didn't have that kind of methodology.
Yeah. No, I love that. I completely love that. And there's so many companies that I've been working with, like ING Bank, for example, or Unilever, who are now actually doing the same thing. And having these conversations, Unilever put over 10,000 managers through their program, and part of the program is understanding how they can link their why to the business. And there were employees that that left, and Unilever helped them find new roles outside and realize that this isn't the right place for you. And that was so refreshing to see that. And guess what? Some of those people did come back in a few years later into other roles in the organization as well. So I do feel like we're making big strides in this space, but you're going to lose them anyway. It's a matter of time already to do that.
If anything came out of the last year, there's a lot of people who sort of woke up and said, oh my God, this is life. Like, I'm not just going through the rat race.
100%. Yeah, it was a big theme in our last summit. So many people, and even personally, we can all, like friends, family members of mine, they've had a lot of time to think over the last year and reflect on, is this really what I want to be doing? And I can tell you, some of the most talented people that I know right now are looking for other opportunities. And those organizations probably have no idea that those people are actually looking right now as well. How do we know if our company's ready for 10x talent?
We actually have a little quiz on our book website, gamechangerthebook.com, where individuals and companies can sort of establish where they are. It's a really good question. I don't know that there's a way to sort of look in the mirror, because companies are so many different shapes and sizes. But I can tell you that whatever it is, it's going to start from the top. It has to be a culture from the C-suite of, we want this to be a people-centric organization. If you're not a people-centric organization, you're definitely not ready to be working with 10Xers, and you're not going to be able to retain 10Xers. So I think it really starts with that. And it's interesting, I was part of a LinkedIn discussion this week where a question was posed. Businesses sort of fall under sort of 4 different types of categories, and they listed employee-centric, and they gave Google as an example of that, business-centric, they gave Microsoft as an example of that, customer-centric, they gave Amazon as an example of that, and innovation-centric, and they named Tesla. And the question was, where should companies really put their focus? And my answer was, at the end of the day, if you want to be business-centric, customer-centric, or innovation-centric, you must first be employee-centric. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to be successful in the business of the future, where you're doing more with less, you have to be employee-centric. So it really starts there, and it starts with the C-suite.
I agree.
That was super well said, my friend.
Yeah, because if you're employee-centric, it flows to those other 3 areas, right? By default. If you're employee-centric, that flows over to your customers, it flows over to the innovation. It all trickles out from there. Definitely. Because I asked that question as well, because I noticed a lot of talented people that I've come across in the past, they're super successful in one company, and they'll go into another company and it's just a disaster, and they cannot perform. And I've always wondered, like, why is that this person who I've worked with, who's super successful here, goes over to a company and it's just they're gone in the first couple of months.
Culture matters,
Mm-hmm.
and it starts from the top down. And if it's not clearly conveyed and communicated and lived daily, it doesn't really work.
Yeah, definitely. What are some of your favorite stories or examples from entrepreneurs or companies that you've come across?
So I was alluding to an example earlier, and I can't name names in the story. I hope it'll still be a good story. We actually cite this in the book. So there was a company that the CEO came to us and said, do you have people who can build this thing, whatever this thing was? We showed him a couple of people, and he felt very good about them. And he said, all right, listen, we didn't have this conversation. I'll be back in a few weeks. I didn't know him at the time. And he came back about 3 weeks later, and he said, okay, I've laid off 33 people out of my 36-person team. And he said, don't worry, they've been really well taken care of. And let's go. And I want to completely rebuild our product from the ground up. And I want your guys to do it. And it was amazing. In 6 months, they completely rebuilt the product. They ultimately did bring on 2 or 3 more people over the course of the next couple of years of rebuilding this. But it was a giant win, and it ended up being about 4 or 5 people on an ongoing basis that replaced 33, or ultimately 36. And everybody was happy, other than maybe the people who got laid off, although I suspect, based on what I understood about the culture, that they probably weren't super happy in that job anyway, because the culture had gotten really stale. And I think that part of, as we talk about culture and we talk about the why, we also have to talk about values. So as a company, we got together internally, not with our clients, just with our internal team, and created core values for our company. And it's great to do that and have them and put them away. But if you're not living those values, they're useless.
Yep.
So we have regular reviews where we look at those and we say, are we doing this? Are we owning our mistakes? Are we helping each other the way that we want to do? Are we keeping the work-life balance that we want? These are some of our core values. And there are moments where we look at them and we're like, this is not really, this behavior is not really reflected here. And we have to step up to that. And I think that that's really part of the, when you talk about the great stories and the great companies, these are the companies that do that. You can look at a company like an Uber that had Uber success in terms of high-speed growth, and then it almost collapsed under its own weight, or WeWork for that matter, because it didn't have the culture. It didn't have the underpinnings. It wasn't built on a solid foundation of agreed upon values. It was built on one value, which was make money and do it fast. That's not a bad value if that's what you want, but everybody's got to be on board for that.
And
I just want to add to that. One of my favorite parts of the book, and Michael's giving an example of how a company benefited from 10Xers. One of my favorite parts of the book is the interview that we did with two 10Xers in their own right, John Landau and Barbara Carr, who managed Bruce Springsteen. And it was really a story about an interview about Bruce Springsteen, who is the 10Xer, one of the 10Xers that we hold up as, somebody who is over the years, over the decades, proven how unbelievably talented he is on so many different levels. And, so you can see 10Xers in front of your face in so many different ways. Bruce Springsteen is our example of, or our poster child in the book of a 10Xer. But these people are real. But the point of the book really is not so much about you becoming that 10Xer. It's more about the things you can do to improve yourself down the road towards 10X, because 10Xers are outliers. Not all of us can be 10Xers. I'm not a 10Xer. I work daily to try and be more 10X like. And the book is really split into what companies can do to be more 10X and hospitable towards 10Xers, and then what you as an individual can do to push yourself down the 10X spectrum. So I just sort of wanted to point that out. It's not just companies that can benefit from 10Xers, but it's individuals that can benefit from the examples set by other 10Xers that they see in the world.
Because that was going to be my next question. How do we go from good to great to 10X? Are 10Xers born? Are they made? Do you think that this is something we can develop in people?
Yes. I think that you have to have a certain level of biology in order to be able to be successful in certain ways. But there's many examples of people who have tremendous IQs that are not 10Xers. And there's even people who have tremendous IQs and modest EQs who can't be 10Xers. One of the things that is a quality of a 10Xer is a lifelong desire to learn. So they're in a cycle of continuous improvement, which is part of what Rishon was saying about he and I may not be 10Xers, but we're always working toward it. We haven't reached being 10X yet, but we're 10Xer. We have a 10Xer quality in the fact that we are constantly working on improvement, and open to that feedback and open to what it takes to make that happen. And then the other part of this that goes along with that, to me, that is a very important quality of 10Xers is they love challenges. They love hard problems. The harder the problem, the less they need to be paid, because they like working on things that are challenging.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't think you're born with. I think that's something that you learn. And I think that, sitting here as Americans, I can tell you a lot of the 10Xers that we encounter are either not American born or their parents aren't American born. And I think that there's something about science, the side of science and technology that and curiosity that gets instilled. And I think that the immigrants in the United States bring a lot of that. It's not to say that it doesn't exist among Americans, and I don't want to grossly generalize here, but there's a very noticeable pattern about people who have parents who are in science and technology that lead to people who are curious and inquisitive and constantly trying to learn new things and solve hard problems, because that is an incredible value. And I'll just add one last point to this, which is there are 3 pleasure centers of the brain. I won't surprise you when I tell you that sex is one and eating is the other. The third one is learning. We have collectively screwed up education so badly that everybody no longer likes learning, but the 10Xers, they still really like learning, and they get like dopamine and they get all these great chemical internal rewards for that learning experience. And I think if we can figure out how to fix education, we can maybe get back there, but that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, we've covered so much, and I'm sorry I've chatted away myself. So sorry to go into too much detail. But if there's some top 3 tips that you would give to organizations and the team to help them on this journey to managing, retaining 10Xers, what would that be? Even if it's 1 or 2, just practical things they can do. Those things, at least we can make a start. And then where can everyone connect with you both and learn more about the work?
Michael, why don't you take what businesses can do, and I'll take what individuals can do, and then we can go.
So I think for companies, it starts with tearing down everything you do and just imagine rebuilding the process of hiring and managing without all of the baggage of the legacy. The legacy, if you think about like so many of our practices for hiring and managing, it's stuff that we just did because it was done before. It was not rethought. So the first thing is start when you have a candidate you really want, start by understanding their why, what they care about in a work environment, what they care about in a package, make a custom offer. Once you get them in the door, same kind of thing. What is their, if you're managing them, what is their why? How can you support them? Talk to them, be human, understand that they have a life outside of work that is going to impact their work performance, and you don't have to insert yourself or involve yourself in their personal life, but you do have to understand, acknowledge, and make accommodations for it, because the more you treat them like a human being, the more comfortable, the better they feel about working there. Give them the regular feedback and figure out how they want that feedback. Figure out how they want to be managed. And I don't mean that you have to manage, each individual completely different from everybody else, except that you do. You actually have to really understand the individuals. Some people need their feedback sandwiched, but their constructive feedback sandwiched between 17 things they did great. Other people don't need that at all. The best practices say 4 or 6 positive things for each negative thing. I think that 2 positive to each negative is sufficient, but that's not based on a scientific study the way the other stat is. And really, really, really understand that you're dealing with a human being, and the human being is just like you. They have feelings, they have thoughts, they have desires. And the more you're plugged into who that is and how they operate, the better you're going to be able to do in keeping them around and keeping them engaged. It's not enough to just have somebody come in and be like, oh, they're great at sorting widgets, and just have them sort widgets endlessly, because no one wants to do the same thing forever.
100%.
Or it's actually, I shouldn't say no one's. Maybe some people do, but you need to know that. You need to know what they want.
Don't assume. Yeah.
Exactly.
Love it.
I could keep going. I could write roughly 275 pages. Oh, wait, we did that, didn't we?
I'm gonna pick up where you left off, because for the individual, lifelong learning we talked about already. I think that's probably the most important thing, but that's a very broad concept. So an actionable part of lifelong learning is feedback, which Michael just mentioned. Find people in your life who you can get honest feedback from. Can be a coworker, can be your boss, can be a manager, can be a cousin, can be a friend. Learn about the strengths that you have and also the weaknesses, and how you can improve both personally and professionally. Like maybe you're not a great writer, and so you get some feedback from a supervisor that the memo you wrote needs some work. Okay, that's great advice. Maybe you're not thrilled to hear it, but it's great and actionable advice. And the other thing I would say that is really important, and we talk about this a lot in the book, find somebody in your life who can be a mentor. Mentorships is something that used to happen a lot in the ye olden days. It doesn't happen as much anymore. There isn't a lot of time for that, but everybody's got somebody in their life who can mentor them in some way, shape, or form, who can give them some advice, some direction, some guidance. We talk about this as having skin in the game, somebody who has skin in the game in your life. I would try and, make your manager one of those people. Get them to want to advocate on your behalf by putting in the extra time, putting in the extra effort, showing that you care, being passionate. And then we talked about grit. If you don't have grit, none of these other things really matter, because you have already quit the job and moved on to something else that you will then quit as well. You have to persevere through these things. So grit, feedback, continuous learning, and finding a mentor in your life. I think those are the most important things that you can do to sort of push yourself down that 10X path.
Amazing.
And then you asked about where people can contact us. And I mentioned the book website before, gamechangerthebook.com. Our LinkedIn and other contact information is on there. And also you can take the 10X quiz. So as an individual, you can see, where do you sort of stack up on the 10X spectrum? And as a company, you can even take it on behalf of your company based on what you know, where do they stack up? So that's that.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I'm really genuinely super excited about the work that you're doing. And I need a 10X jumper jacket though at some point, a hoodie. So I'm gonna have to get hold of one of those.
It can happen.
Wish I could fax it to you.
Oh, imagine. Yeah. But
Chris, this was great. Thank you so much for having us on. We appreciate the conversation.
It's been a pleasure. Definitely a highlight of my week. Genuinely not just saying that. I love this topic. It's taken us 300 episodes to cover it. So I'm glad we finally got there as well. And for everyone listening, please like, comment, share, tag in managers, colleagues that you feel would gain value. Want to share as much knowledge and experience with everyone as possible. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you both again soon.
Thanks, Chris. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.